What's eating New York? The answer to this age-old question lies not on the streets, not in the skyscrapers, not even in the brash attitudes of New Yorkers. Oh my God! What's eating New York literally are hundreds of thousands of macroorganisms breeding in the Hudson and East Rivers. There they are.
That's something that's in the water. It's a living organism. It's doing what it does. It eats.
We're taking core samples of the wood, and they were crawling everywhere.
What happened when he turned around and jumped on me and smothered me and cut me.
When an 87-year-old great-grandmother became the victim of a violent knife attack earlier this year, the city was horrified.
I'm going to be all right. I'm just refusing to give up.
Vivian Squires is not your typical granny. She's a retired corrections officer who spent years working at some of New York's toughest prisons, trying to rehabilitate prisoners. Now she hopes she can do the same with other individuals like the career criminal who attacked her.
At this stage of her life, she still has that to go forth.
I seen a big change in this neighborhood. Change doesn't always mean good.
The Lower East Side is a community steeped in history and one rife with change and controversy.
Unfortunately, you get a certain amount of gentrification because without money, you're not going to get improvement.
Come on, y'all. Y'all trying to kick us out. Y'all gonna have to scrape me off the ceiling. I'm not going nowhere.
We'll meet interesting characters from both sides in this, the latest chapter in the East Side story.
And hey, have you ever seen me sober?
Tonight, the story of one group that made the cut and is today one of the most visible acts by the tracks.
We're back to basics, and this is obviously where I belong, and it's a great thing, yeah.
The Ebony Hillbillies, four men who bring the sounds of the Deep South to the depths of New York City.
I'm Eviatar Gore.
I'm Saida Frias.
I'm Deandra Muzan.
I'm Monica Suma. Those stories tonight on a special City University of New York edition of 60 Minutes.
What's eating New York? The answer to this age-old question lies not on the streets, not in the skyscrapers, not even in the brash attitudes of New Yorkers. What's eating New York literally are hundreds of thousands of macroorganisms breeding in the Hudson and East Rivers. Like termites, these little sea creatures eat wood, and some may even eat concrete. This all poses a threat to the piers, pilings, and many riverside structures, including the United Nations and the FDR Drive. And the damages could run into the billions. Just what are these tiny gremlins, and where did they come from? To find out, we went looking in some pretty murky water. Lenny Sperrigan is a diver. He has been inspecting these waters for decades. In Red Hook, Brooklyn, he showed us evidence of where these creatures live. We watched Lenny on a monitor while he inspected the piers underwater looking for the creatures called marine boars. Lenny, what you're cleaning up right there, that's the boars?
Roger that. I've got some pencil holes which look like
Teredos. That's the name of one of the creatures boring away at the piers. There are two kinds of marine boars. Limnoria, also known as gribbles, eat the wood from the outside in. And teredos, also known as shipworms, eat the wood from the inside out. When was the first time that you actually saw one of these creatures? How did you react?
We were underneath the UN school on the East River, and for the first time the visibility was good enough that I could actually see them thriving. We were taking core samples of the wood, and they were crawling everywhere. It was a bit of a shock to see those kind of numbers. The pile looked like it was moving. The pile didn't have a hard edge to it. It just was shimmering. And all I could think of is, wonder if they eat through the gloves. It was a real wake-up call. You'd see piles hourglassed from 15 inches down to 4. and realized that there are a lot of these guys eating.
This pile, brought up from the water, clearly shows the damage caused by these little creatures. We asked Lenny's diving partner, Adam Brown, how quickly these little guys eat the wood.
That can happen within a year.
Within a year, and a column can be gone.
Yeah, yeah. If it's an untreated piece of timber, it can be eaten within a year. It's like cancer. You see evidence a little bit somewhere, you know it exists elsewhere. And the waterway is an open system, you know, so it's easy for them to move around.
I've never had a dive where I didn't say marine boar activity. There's never been a dive.
Even in heavily polluted waters like the Gowanus Canal, we found areas where there were extremely deteriorated timbers.
Now, the waters around New York are cleaner. But years ago, when it was heavily polluted, they couldn't survive. To many people's surprise, once the waters were clean, the marine boars came back.
When was the point that they came back and started posing a problem? What happened in between?
Well, you have to understand that we didn't view these rivers, this harbor, so much as an ecosystem as a waste disposal system. In 1972, the Clean Water Act was passed, and at that point, there was a guessing game on how long it would take the harbor to restore its natural ecosystem. And it actually happened a lot faster than anyone could have expected. By the mid-'80s, we had piers that were in serious trouble. We had piers that were starting to collapse and fall in. The marine boars came back with a vengeance.
Some would say it's a bit ironic.
Oh, it's the great irony. We forgot, from a cultural standpoint, we just lost our sense of what the waterfront takes to maintain, because the water was so dirty, the infrastructure didn't deteriorate. So by the mid-'80s, when the water was getting cleaner, 10 years after the Clean Water Act went into effect, suddenly, piers were collapsing and nobody knew why. So we went in and we found the evidence of marine boar attack, and at first they didn't believe us, because no one in city government, and none of the engineers, none of the city agencies who were tasked with maintaining and being responsible for the infrastructure had ever seen marine boars before.
Was there any organization or person that was in charge of saying, okay, once we clean the river, just FYI, so-and-so life forms are going to come back, so you might as well deal with it? Was there anyone who said that?
I did.
We didn't think it would happen so quickly.
I did.
Oh, okay. Well, he did.
Nobody listens to me.
To get a closer look at these creatures, we went under a pier and got a sample.
There they are.
Wait, this looks just like something that'll be in the gumbo later on.
That's something that's in the water. It's a living organism. It's doing what it does. It eats. You can't dislike it because it eats, but you can't have it destroying the piers either.
All right, so we're pulling out the second sample that he's bringing out, and look at this. This is a huge chunk of wood that's being eaten up. We're gonna take a closer look at it. There we go. Excellent. So this is it. This is what boars do.
Here are the gribbles,
Really tiny.
which are much smaller and harder to see than the Toritos.
One of the earlier methods of protecting the timber structures from marine boars was to literally wrap them in plastic wrap. Problem is, anytime it's plastic wrap and there's so much debris floating around in the river and piers move, that if you cut or rip the plastic wrap, you now are letting in fresh water and oxygen, and it defeats the whole purpose. So now you've got a pile which looks like it's protected, but has a small hidden hole someplace that's just letting fresh water in, and you've got marine boars inside eating their way, through the thing to their heart's content, and nobody can see it.
Dr. James Servino believes he can use solar power to send an electric current down into the water to speed up the growth of naturally occurring mollusks to protect the piers from marine boars.
We have alternative energy here. We have an anode and a cathode attached to these DNA helixes. What we want to do is wire up these piles and grow calcifying marine organisms like barnacles and oysters and mussels, preventing marine boars from getting into the wood and eating away at the wood.
So it's a natural barrier.
A natural barrier, exactly.
Is it possible to get this on a large scale using solar panels?
Well, let me ask you this. How hard would it be to wire up the base of the Brooklyn Bridge with metal mesh, stick a solar panel up on the top to create solar energy? It would cost nothing.
This plan is experimental, but he hopes it will ease the problem. Will it work? Or will this be another failed example of man versus nature?
It is a war in the sense of we come up with an idea, we implement it, we see how well the plan works. Nature comes back usually within 2 to 5 years and says, it was a nice try. Why don't you try again? We've defeated you this shot around. Our budgets are finite. Nature's budget is not.
When an 87-year-old great-grandmother became the victim of a violent knife attack earlier this year, the city was horrified. But from this brutality came an inspiring story. The victim, Vivian Squires, recovered from her near-fatal wounds and decided to reach out. Not to other victims, but to other individuals like the career criminal who attacked her. You see, Vivian Squires is not your typical granny. She's a retired corrections officer who spent years working at some of New York's toughest prisons, trying to rehabilitate prisoners. Now she hopes she can do the same with her newly formed community group called the Grittiest Granny Gang. We begin our story on the morning that Vivian Squires was attacked. At 6 a.m. on January 4th, 2009, Vivian awoke to see a man standing next to her bedroom window. Thinking it was her nephew who lives upstairs, she called out, "Tony?" Just then, the man lunged at Vivian, put a pillow over her face, and slashed her throat.
Cut me, cut my throat, cut me here. My back is like a map where he slashed. I didn't know who he was or why he was doing it and what had happened. I was shocked. I was totally in shock.
Though the man was much stronger than her, Vivian fought back.
At one time I decided, oh, it's easy to just close my eyes and die. I could feel the blood, the cuts. And then something says, Vivian, you got too much to do. And I started fighting again. We rolled on the floor and tussled. And I was trying to think of all the things I'd seen in the movies that you do to try to get free.
But nothing stopped her attacker until she simply held her breath and played dead. The man fled and Vivian called 911. She was taken to Mary Immaculate Hospital where she received 35 staples and dozens of stitches. She was released within 2 days. 2 months later, police arrested 33-year-old Andre Mathis and charged him with attempted murder.
But I believe there's a reason everything happens. And I'm still here. That's the joy, that I'm still here.
Still here and determined not to let this happen to other seniors. Vivian formed a group to mentor troubled youths and gang members to show them a better lifestyle. The name of the group? The Grittiest Granny Gang. She's been getting a lot of support from the congregation at the New Jerusalem Baptist Church. Carlene Thorbs is a pastor. What attracted you to the Grittiest Granny program?
Her desire to go forth in helping youth, which that's our future. If we lose our youth, we're going to lose the future. So that's what has impressed me the most. At this stage of her life, she still has that to go forth.
Sandra Brown, the director of Christian education, was struck by Vivian's resolve to extend youth programs beyond the congregation.
She has a long history of working with what we call people on the fringes to embrace not only the children present, but the children in the community that are kind of lost and disconnected. So she asked me at that time, what could we do when we talk about ministry beyond the walls?
What do you think motivates Ms. Squires?
I think it's genuine love and there's a sincerity for people. Because without that, it does not matter how artistic you are or how well you can speak. If you don't have a genuine and sincere desire to help people, I don't think she would be successful. And she has been, and I'm confident that she will be again.
At 87, Vivian Squires is no newcomer to lending a hand to people on society's fringes. In 1952, she began a long career as a corrections officer in the Women's House of Detention.
I had 21 of the best years of my life in that prison.
But she did more than just keep an eye on inmates. She began a program that taught them how to sew and make their own clothes. They even had fashion shows. In 1973, she retired from the Department of Corrections and opened the Co-workers Development Corporation, in which she taught ex-cons how to work and help them get their lives on the right track.
I worked with hundreds of people. Started out for just women, and then I had the men in there too. And it was a series of businesses. You know, we had the factory and the restaurant, the beauty parlor and the boutique. They came from the prison and they came to me, and we had a job waiting for them. They had helped them get apartments. They got their children out of foster homes. And they learned how to work, and they stopped committing crimes.
Although the program was successful, it was closed in 1976 due to lack of funding.
When I found out they were closing the program and I had to tell them that we were going to close, they called me Boss, and they said, "Boss, can we talk to you?" So we got a plan, and we were wondering if you would listen to us. So we sat in a circle and we listened, and they said, "If you just give us permission to go back and do all the things we were doing before we came to you, we'd have enough money to save the program."
They were actually asking her permission to use the profits from their earlier lives of crime to fund the program.
So we added it up, all the money that they made prostituting and shoplifting and selling drugs, and it was more than enough. But I couldn't say yes, and they didn't want to say yes. But they made a lot of money.
Now, 30 years later, she's still interested in changing the criminal mind and thinks she can learn something from the street gang mentality.
Well, I want to learn more about gangs, and they seem to be very successful in what they do. They get people to follow them. And I want to take a few lessons from some of the leaders.
You want to have leaders of gangs come speak to you, or you just want to find out?
I'm going to them.
You're going to them?
Yes.
Okay. Though some may be skeptical, her godson Tico, a fencing and martial arts instructor, thinks she is just the woman for the job.
She is a remarkable woman, and she has been consistent in everything she has done.
I mean, come on, Tico, do you really think that an 87-year-old woman is going to be able to communicate effectively to these young people?
I think that they'll take her quite seriously. I think they will respect her because she has the courage to confront them.
But while her godson and members of her congregation all support her endeavors, not everyone is as optimistic.
I think it's pointless. I honestly feel it's not going to work because these individual kids nowadays don't have any structure.
We spoke to Frank Perry, a former gang member who founded the Wave Space Impact Group, which targets at-risk youth. Perry and two of his group members took us on a tour of their neighborhood where gang violence is a part of daily life.
I was a member of the gang that they called the Bloods, the New York Scarface, non-trade gangster blood gang. I wanted to let everyone know I was the most gangsterous person from this area. I wanted everyone to see that there was no one that could mess with me. It was cool to be the gangster. It was cool for you to grow up. All the girls liked the gangsters. All the guys feared the gangsters, you know.
They use a different approach than Vivian, but convey the same message.
I feel if us three right here could really take these kids and send them a message so that they know that they don't have to be running around knocking old ladies over the head, or they don't got to be running, sticking people up, and that there's other ways for them to get money, there's other ways for them to make a career with their life. That's what we're trying to do.
And while Frank may doubt that Vivian's gang could have any impact, for her part, Vivian remains determined. As for her attacker, Andre Mathis, he sits in a cell on Rikers Island awaiting trial, facing up to 25 years in prison. Have you forgiven Andre Mathis?
Well, you know, when you go around without forgiving people, it tells on you, and I suffer more than they do. You know, a lot of people you're angry with and you won't forgive them, and they're out having a good time and you're suffering and miserable. So it doesn't pay. So I turn all my problems over to the Lord, and I say, you take care of them, because I've done as much as I can. And I say, okay, this must be a reason for this, and I can bear it, and I'm going to be all right. I'm just refusing to give up.
The Lower East Side is a community steeped in history and one rife with change and controversy. Today, it continues to be a study in extreme cultures, the haves and the have-nots. On one side are the yuppies, reeling from the economy but still trying to renovate the tenements into high-priced co-ops. On the other side, the low-income residents and the squatters, whose numbers seem to be on the rise. Tonight, we'll meet interesting characters from both sides in this, the latest chapter in the East Side Story. Beautiful buildings, magnificent shopping areas with cultural diversity. These are the new features of the Lower East Side. But as Jamie Morgan, who likes to be called Grandma, says, all this so-called beautification has not made the neighborhood better for her or her family. How long have you been living in this community?
April made 48 years I've been living in this community.
In this community?
And also in this project, yes.
When 48 years ago, how did this community look?
Well, it was down. It wasn't as up as it is now. But by it being down, it made a lot of changes. But the changes didn't benefit us of the Lower East Side. Our children grew up here. They couldn't even get apartments here. And the buildings they was putting up cost too much for young people that was just moving out.
They're building new buildings.
Yes.
For the middle to high class, upper high class.
The rich.
Okay,
the rich. For them to live. The ones that was here when I came in, I was not good enough for them. They moved out on the hour. Now they want to come back in and move us out. They are not having my apartment.
Do you believe that gentrification has improved your neighborhood?
It have improved, but not for the younger generation that is coming along because of the price for rent. A studio apartment for a young person, say I'm 22 years old, $1,000? Let's face it, they just starting out. How they gonna be able to pay $1,000 for a studio apartment?
Another longtime resident, Chantel Dunbar, has also felt oppressed by the gentrification.
I seen a big change in this neighborhood. Change doesn't always mean good. On Houston Street, which is considered to be the more middle class, where now they have nothing but bars. They have more bars down here than they have schools, than they have after-school programs, than they have just activities set up for the children around here. I went to an open house not too long ago on Clinton Street in Riverton. The rent a month was $4,400. They said you had to have double the amount of money in your bank account. Who can afford that living down here in the Lower East Side?
David Heitman, a property owner, says that change on the Lower East Side was inevitable.
Almost 30 years ago, you could see the trend of rents increasing. Back then, $500 a month was an expensive apartment. Now, in the same building, you'll pay $3,000 a month, for the same type of apartment. Unfortunately, you get a certain amount of gentrification because without money, you're not going to get improvement. Which is why we were hoping more people like us would do projects. But it does take some money, and it took 5 years of sweat equity. Working every weekend on our building, putting in every penny that we had.
So what do you say to those people who say gentrification is pushing out the poor and bringing in the
elite?
The elite class?
I don't know. All I can say is the young people stay in school, get a good education so they can get good paying jobs, so they can stay, make money. I think it's inevitable what is happening. New York City is like, I don't know, you see what's happening. It's spreading out into Queens and Brooklyn, all over the place.
Another part of this human tapestry, not to be omitted from our report, is a more unsightly group, those that choose a freer lifestyle, free of rent, free of responsibility. Men who concern themselves less with the social issues of the day than with alcohol and drugs. This man told us his name is Question. If you had an opportunity to change your life, would you?
No.
No. Why?
This lifestyle fucking rocks. If you're never hungry and you're rarely ever unhappy, bored, don't come as unhappy. If this lifestyle, you're bored constantly. I'm happy. I'm happy with my life. I'm never hungry. And hey, have you ever seen me sober?
Now, do you believe that it's fair to occupy abandoned buildings and live rent-free?
Pretty much, if it's abandoned and you're not destroying anything,
Should be allowed to say that.
why should you be allowed to stay? Why shouldn't you be allowed to stay? Out of sight of society?
To give us some perspective, we spoke with Lower East Side historian Susan Wasserman.
The Lower East Side is kind of a perfect example of gentrification. It's a neighborhood that has historically, for the last 200 years, been populated by poor and working class and immigrants, recent immigrants, until very, very recently, I would say within the last 10 years. With the housing boom and with the housing bubble, there's been a move by more middle class and wealthy people to move into the Lower East Side. And that's been a very, very dramatic change in the last 10 years.
And how has it affected the Lower East Side gentrification specifically?
It's put a lot of pressure on poor people who live there. They can't afford the rents. They can't afford the new grocery stores that have come in, the Whole Foods or you know, the Dean and DeLucas, and so it's become harder and harder for poor and working class people in the neighborhood. And it'll be interesting to see what happens now that the bubble has burst, because there's also a lot of construction that's been going on the Lower East Side. If you look at places like the top of Orchard Street, right below Houston, all these buildings have been torn down, so that removes housing stock. That's key about New York in general, and particularly about the Lower East Side, is that there's things that have always remained the same, and there's also constant change taking place.
As the rent is steadily on the rise, the lower income residents keep asking why. The Lower East Side continues to sprout new luxury co-ops, while the original residents look on with resentment.
Come on, are y'all building this for us, or y'all building this for somebody else to come in to take over? Why? Because we on prime real estate? Because it's easier for us to get to anywhere? Come on, y'all trying to kick us out. Y'all gonna have to scrape me off the ceiling. I'm not going nowhere.
The New York City subway system has long been an outlet for, excuse the phrase, underground performers, rogues from graffiti artists to mimes to musicians who have long used the subways as a free place to express their talents. Now, the MTA who runs the subways regulates the system and holds auditions for those only they see fit to use the trains and platforms as galleries and concert venues. Tonight, the story of one group that made the cut and is today one of the most visible acts by the tracks, the Ebony Hillbillies, four men who bring the sounds of the Deep South to the depths of New York City. The Ebony Hillbillies are a quartet led by Enrique Prince playing the fiddle, William Salty Bill Salter on the acoustic bass, AR on washboard and percussion, and Norris Bennett on banjo and vocals.
The best way to work on music is live, and you can't really do that in a lot of things. You can't get to do what you want to do. So
this gives you more independence?
Oh yeah, it's very independent. You just go and play. You also play directly to the people. You get to work on the music. You can repeat a song. You can work on things.
Together, this group has been invited to play at notable venues all over the world.
Someone came up to us at Times Square and said, "You guys are great. We'd love you to do the family show at Carnegie Hall."
Wow.
We played Joe's Pub several times. Joe's Pub is probably the last best club left in New York.
It's easy for the music to be mistaken for bluegrass or folk music.
Well, the music that we're playing basically is old
time music, meaning music basically generally from before the 19th century, before Dixieland really, and it's before the blues.
Careful selection of kitchen sink instruments are a key part in maintaining the group's Black Southern roots, drawing from the days of slavery, where music was created using everyday materials.
I always wanted to play country music, so I rigged up my own setup here, cowbell, blocks, cymbals, and an old simple washboard which you wash your clothes with. So if you play hard, it gives a rough
sound.
Yeah, so now I can control the sound.
We met with the Ebony Hillbillies at a Taste of Times Square, a 2-block restaurant event stretching down 47th Street, Restaurant Row. Almost 5 hours passed before we were able to speak with them again. They were busy playing for the hundreds of tourists and New Yorkers passing by.
All these restaurants in the Times Square area, they make up these dishes, they put them out. I've also done this thing for 7 or 8 years. Oh my God.
Those who stop, those who will take the time and moment to stop, are those who usually can't help themselves, and they're interested. This is the moment of not only history, but this is the now.
The money they earn working in the subway is somewhat of a taboo subject for them. From our observations, they earned around $300 for their 4-hour performance. However, at this night's event, Bill estimated the group made about $400. How much money do you get after singing a few hours at the subway or at a gig like this?
Well, I don't know if I'm privy to really say that because
approximately,
it's not very much. When I say that, it's what it is after 4 hours of working collectively, and all 4 of us splitting that up, then it's less than $100, but
per person?
Yeah.
Okay. But I heard you wrote some very famous songs. Can you tell me what songs you wrote?
Quite a few. I've written quite a few. What America is aware of would be songs like "Where Is the Love" was our first hit song, and just the two of us.
Do people know that you wrote these songs?
More than likely not.
Are you upset by that? Are you?
By no means.
No.
No. Because it would be nice to be recognized and to be credited by it.
Yeah,
but
I mean,
I'm credited with the money.
Yeah.
By royalties, and that's really okay with me.
Do you get any royalties?
Oh, by all means.
Yeah. Okay. That's good. That's good.
That really supports my. If I was as a musician, I don't make much money. Well, I like this too. I didn't know that I would like it because I was at other times in my life because I was playing more sophisticated music.
Yeah.
But now we're back to basics, and this is obviously where I belong. I said where I belong, and it's a great thing. Yeah.
After a lifetime of music, the Ebony Hillbillies continue to play under the streets of New York.